Network.
They say it should be impossible for bumblebees to fly because their wings are too small for their bodies. But bumblebees don't care. They just fly. Bright Expectations is dedicated to helping our Florida residents with special needs and unique abilities find the resources, support, and inspiration that they and their families need to break barriers and achieve their dreams. Visit www.brightexpectations.com to start your journey today.
This message is sponsored by the Florida Department of Health, the Florida Association of Broadcasters, and this radio station.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening, and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. My name is Dr. Richard Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And my awesome big brother.
Still my favorite role.
Good to be with you this week.
Same here.
How's everything?
All things considered, not too bad. We had a little bit of a spring break from classroom teaching last week, but it didn't turn out to be much of a break for us.
Yeah, really. Always.
Right? I think we both ended up finding ourselves busier in a week we were supposed to have off.
That's the way it goes when you juggle so many balls for a living.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Yes, indeed. So speaking of your balls and juggling them, how could people sort of get a hold of us?
Yeah, we should start off this way for a change instead of always waiting till we run out of time at the end of the show.
Yes.
I can be reached for a private consultation or questions or therapy session. I have an office in Boca Raton for those of you listening locally by sending an email to ricky@modernsextherapy.com. Or you can give me a call at 561-809-1080. I'm sure at some point during the show, our producer will run Chiron on the bottom there with some contact information. Also would like to plug Modern Sex Therapy Institutes, a training organization I have the pleasure of co-directing with our dear friend Dr. Rachel Needle, a West Palm Beach psychologist. Larry, of course, is one of our esteemed faculty. And we train mental health and medical professionals all over the country in sex therapy and sexual medicine and how to ask the questions, which is an important part of our topic for tonight.
Absolutely.
And you have something to plug as well.
I do. Yeah, coming up on the 29th of this month, working with Ann Goldberg, the Savvy Senior Services. We have put a couple of programs together. Particularly around sexuality and cannabis for boomers and seniors. And on the 29th, we're doing a social for boomers and seniors, just for adults. It's called 1+1 Social. So we encourage people to bring a friend. It doesn't have to be a significant other or anything like that. We're going to have music. We'll have some food. Be some good interactive activities. And we'll talk a little bit about cannabis as well. So it's going to be a fun social, but we'll have a little bit of information that we'll be able to impart. And that's going to be on, like I said, March 29th at the Phoenix in Delray, which is West Delray, which is a community. It's not the old bar.
Oh, not the
on
old
A1A.
Phoenix. No, that was still the greatest thing that ever happened to Delray. Yeah. The Phoenix Ballroom in West Delray.
Right. So people can get a hold of me.
Can I be your plus one?
Yeah, it'd be great.
Since I was so depressed to find out that I'm a baby boomer. I thought I was a year later, but...
No, you got pretty much...
1963, I think.
Yeah, well,
or even
64. You're not even the last year. I hate to break it to you.
We're getting old. There's, if you're watching on Facebook, welcome and thank you for joining us. And we have a flyer.
There's a visual there. Yeah, that's our flyer.
Friday
March 29th, 7:30.
That's terrific.
Excellent.
But
thank you, Freddie. And if people want to get a hold of us and maybe have questions that they want to ask tonight,
go right to the Facebook page, Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers, and you can hit the send email button. We should give the radio plug. If you're listening on the radio, again, we're on 95.3 FM and 1470 AM in South Florida, and you can call in at 888-565-1470.
Yes.
And you can also get more information by visiting modernsextherapyinstitutes.com, especially those of you professionals who are joining us, because our topic for tonight is something that the mental health and medical fields still suck at, if I may put it bluntly.
Yeah.
And that is dealing with sexual orientation issues and sexual identity issues, and another one of these areas where millennials and frankly most Americans are way ahead of, forget about politicians, but even the mental health field. There's still a tremendous amount of fear and homophobia, and way too many therapists that go, ooh, a gay couple, I have to refer. I don't know enough. I don't know enough about the gays.
Exactly.
Right?
That's the bias that I think does a lot of damage. Not overt homophobia or heterosexism.
Well,
that's
fear,
the
right?
stuff.
Phobia is fear. And of
Right.
course, hatred naturally springs from that which we fear, our more id instincts. When we don't understand something or when we fear something, we tend to lash out with hatred.
Right.
Whether that's violence, and of course we know that LGBTQ communities still are disgustingly disproportionately the victims of violence, and so often law enforcement looks the other way or doesn't take it as seriously as other hate crimes, especially based on gender or race.
Yeah,
And
but you're not even just in terms of violence and crime. You're talking about groups of people that have the highest suicide rates.
Right. And, again, we're still fighting this stigma. There's still a lot of licensed clinicians that want to hang on to this ridiculously outdated idea that it's psychopathological to be anything other than heterosexual and use high suicide rates as evidence of that.
Right.
When in fact the suicide is the result of the societal prejudice and discrimination
and the oppression and marginalization.
Right.
Yes.
So a kid doesn't kill himself because he's gay. He kills himself because he's persecuted and picked on and harassed and
has no place to go.
Right.
And no place to feel safe.
Yeah.
And
that society's failing still.
Right. And again, there's the struggling with these issues. I mean, it still kills me. I remember years ago in Boca, there was a kid at Spanish River. And when I got called from the local news, because every once in a while, we'll get called on to give an opinion. Honor Society, class president, chess club, this club, that club. The classic overachiever seemed to have everything going for him and one day just stepped in front of a train. And my comment at the time, and I still believe this, that whenever I hear situations like that, when it seems so out of the blue, I will bet you the proverbial dollars to donuts that these kids are struggling with sexual identity issues.
Some kind of sexual issue where they feel unsafe or that they can't talk to anybody or they can't express themselves.
Right.
It's a tragedy.
And I want to call something out here, too. You said something a couple of minutes ago, how... And as a country in general, we are kind of ahead of the curve with the rest of the world. But I don't know that I want to give millennials all that much credit. Because I don't know. I mean, in some ways, yes, they're very ahead of the curve from the standpoint of looking at orientation
they've moved the needle
in a fluid
and
kind
acceptance and it being less of a big deal than it was in our generation or our parents' generation.
But they don't have a good handle on this. 100 words, 500 words, however many words to describe or define your identity, that means it's kind of undefinable.
Yeah.
I think they've gone way overboard in a very narcissistic way.
That's another discussion. That's the uniqueness and the narcissism. But I mean, just in terms of acceptance of sexual minority, like we were talking about last week, we really can't even identify any sexual minorities anymore, because if you add up all the minorities, they're the majority. Right?
Well, yeah.
That the vanilla kind of missionary position, heterosexual, is really probably not even the majority anymore. When you look at kink and poly and all of the variations, all of the...
and shades therein, sure, that, is going to be, it's all part of the mainstream now as well. But, the point that where I want to go with this idea, and you're right, that is a separate discussion, but I'm coming back to the point that I've made before, and I'm going to try to find somebody that can see what I'm trying to say. I'm tired of being alone in this idea that this alphabet soup
Yeah.
is
No, you're not alone.
respectful. It is
You're not alone.
marginalizing.
It is. I don't see it used in the well. I think this LGBTQIA has a valid purpose, right, in identifying the range. But I think what gets lost is,
does it?
I think it should.
Where's
be,
heterosexual?
Right. It should be a demonstration of the variety of sexual orientations.
Right. Otherwise,
and gender, right? Because the T has nothing to do with sexual orientation.
And I can say, questioning is not an orientation. And I'm sorry, queer is not an orientation.
Well, it's
queer
an
is
identity.
actually a political position.
It's a political identity, right?
Not a sexual identity.
Intersex is not either.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
It's a medical condition.
So this really, I don't find this helpful.
Right. I've said this to my classes for years. There should be an H for heterosexual in that alphabet soup if we're going to make that point.
Right. And if it's not, and as long as it's not in there, it is just more othering.
Right. Yeah. And the more letters we add to it,
the more othering we're doing.
Right.
We're just increasing the size of the miscellaneous column, the other column.
People are heterosexual or one of these people.
Right. Or everything else.
Right.
And I really, I mean, to me, that is just as heterosexist as overt homophobia and heterosexism.
That's a word we shouldn't gloss over lightly because I'm sure most people aren't used to hearing it, right? Homophobia is probably more well known, but heterosexism is important because our world is heterosexist. Right? Sexism people get the gender roles and cliches and stereotypes and the way too many men treat women, etc. But heterosexism is this just kind of overarching assumption that everybody's supposed to be or is assumed to be heterosexual unless there's reason, unless they identify as something else or, you know, that people are still paranoid about the cues. Like how you cross your legs. Remember silly stuff from like 5th grade, how you look at your nails or how you cross your legs or how you speech mannerisms. Like the homophobia radar. People are wondering about this one or that one.
I don't know if you remember fear. You remember the reactions that I got from people years ago when I first pierced my ears.
Well,
I had to tell people that pirates.
Days, in those
pirates
days,
had pierced ears. Warriors had pierced ears. Okay.
Well, that was the disco days, right? In Studio 54.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, you're a lot older than me.
Thanks for reminding me. Although some of it was fun, I have to say. They were definitely different times.
Yes, they were.
But yeah, and again, I want to come back to this idea that by pushing that needle a little bit more, by breaking out of those little boxes, that is really a great thing. And I think this idea of orientation and identity not fitting in these little discrete boxes, but rather on a continuum where there's fluid movement throughout that continuum. But there's an irony in the way a lot of people talk about this stuff.
Yeah, I was just going to say that frightens people, what you just said.
Right, because
people are afraid. You know, this whole gays in the military thing, there was this fear that if there's a gay soldier in the foxhole, you know, somehow all of these guys in close proximity, you don't want it to rub off, right? Guys on a submarine for months at a time, they're close proximity. You can't have a gay in there because it's contagious.
Right, and they're worried that in the middle of a firefight, you know, instead of
bullets
shooting out, you're going to be sitting there looking at my butt?
Yeah, well, right. And again, that's another thing that people conflate sexual orientation, minority sexual orientations in quotes, with perversion, with predation, with sexual deviance, so that they think a gay person is a child molester. Hi, Amy.
Hey,
boy,
Amy.
are we looking forward to seeing you. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes, indeed.
And thanks for agreeing. Yes. And Christine, wonderful to see you too.
Hey there.
It's an ongoing problem. And I'm hoping that our guest is logging in as we speak. She should be coming on any minute. We're really happy to reconnect with an old school chum, a fellow alum from our doctoral program. Michelle O'Mara is going to be calling in from Indiana momentarily. And
she's doing some interesting work.
Yes. She's we like I said, we went through school together, so she's a clinical sexologist, and there she is.
Speak of.
Hello, Michelle. I'm sure we're getting connected. I don't know if you're hearing us yet, but I'm talking about you until we can.
So this is good. We can talk behind her back, right in front of her face.
Yes. I had to chuckle when I saw Michelle's bio. She describes herself as an expert lesbian relationship coach and a psychotherapist with a comfortable obsession with all things related to love and relationships between women. She's particularly fascinated by lesbian couples in blended families, issues of infidelity, lesbian sexuality, and recovery from lesbian breakups. And she's the author of Just Ask, 1,000 Questions to Grow Your Relationships, which you can get on Kindle, Amazon, iTunes, Google Play. As a side hobby, she operates a quirky site called AskLesbians.com. She also has a project called #AskLesbiansProject.
Excellent.
And she hopefully will get it together.
So let's see. Is Michelle, are you on the phone? Do we have you here?
Yes.
And there
hey.
we see you on the video.
Hello
Terrific.
there.
Hi, Michelle. Really nice to see you. It's been a handful of years.
It's been a very long time.
It has been. It's good to see you.
Yeah, same here.
You look well.
For having me on. So do you. Thank you.
Good.
Very nice. So what's it like being an expert lesbian?
Well, you know,
I love
it's
that
a
part
very
of the intro.
special job.
I imagine.
I'm not sure you fit the qualifications for it.
I'd fail the physical, I think.
Yeah.
No, it's fascinating. And I think the first thing I want to ask you is, well, first, my own kind of evolution over the past 20 years, that I can recall being asked way back then, how do you do sex therapy with a gay couple? And my instinct was like, what do you mean? It's like, how do you do, like the same way you do sex therapy with any couple? It's the couple, and you meet the couple where they are and find out their issues, et cetera, et cetera. But in the ensuing couple of decades, I've done quite a 180 with the help of my business partner. And especially, she pointed out that, first of all, even to be a sex therapist, one needs 3 hours. 1 3-hour course on sexual orientation, whatever that means, hardly qualifies someone. I'm sure we'd all agree that, especially today, the so-called gay-friendly therapist doesn't cut it anymore. So just give us a kind of global intro, if you could, to what's the same, what's different, what's unique about working with, in your area of expertise, with lesbian couples.
Well, I think that's a pretty broad question, but I would agree that in general, there are some very specific experiences that are unique to lesbians that I am not sure somebody who is not accustomed to working with lesbian couples on a regular basis would fully understand. For example, because women tend to be nurturers and bonders, there is the whole U-Haul effect, the classic joke. What is a lesbian?
You have to explain that.
Yeah. And there's, like any sort of stereotype, it starts with a pretty common scenario that has been exaggerated. So, and those are some of the quirky kinds of questions I ask with the surveys that I do, asking actual lesbians, how many dates do you go on before you commit? How many times do you, hang out with somebody before you move in? So there are some interesting things that people say about that. But
so if we could if we could explain for our listeners who might not understand, that U-Haul effect comes from this old cliche that, right, what does a lesbian bring on a second date? A U-Haul. A U-Haul. Right? Like they're shacking up and moving in together.
Yes. And somehow that joke has stayed very alive. I think even younger lesbians seem to be familiar with that, whereas younger lesbians aren't as familiar with the term lesbian bed death.
I was going to ask you about that, too.
Yeah, the concept that after being together for a while, lesbians are, experiencing a rapid decline in their sexual frequency, which is actually what I did my dissertation on, the sexual frequency and relationship satisfaction. So, and I did sort of verify that there is a pattern of rapid decline in sexual activity among lesbians after the first year. So there's that. But I personally think that a lot of variables contribute to that, because I think sexuality is complicated for women in general. So you put two women in a relationship, and then you have twice the complications. So, and I think on that note, another major difference in the way that men and women relate is there are often very clear boundaries around socializing, hobbies, how you spend your time. And a lot of lesbians get very enmeshed and begin nesting and lose interest in their own hobbies and friendships and even family relationships sometimes. So that's a pretty big issue for a lot of my couples, a lot of trust and jealousy. And what do you mean you're going to have a girls' night out? I'm a girl too. Why can't I go? Those kinds of things come up. But I think the other really big issue that I see is the sensitivity in communication. And I certainly don't want to stereotype women as overly sensitive, but women do tend to pick up on nuances, as simple as an extra heavy exhale, where you literally just have extra breath that you need to release, can become an issue. Like, what's wrong? I know something's wrong. Tell me what's wrong.
Right.
And
we talk a lot about boy brain, girl brain, in particular when, talking with women therapists about their work with men, and we really are simpler and really do use less of our brains and don't get a lot of nuance.
Right. Well, when you look at the differences in some of those association areas, especially some of those striatal areas that, women have, and I've talked about this for many years, this, what I could just call shades of black, which is a term I just started using when I made the mistake, and I think you'll appreciate why I call this a mistake, of looking into a friend of mine's closet and asking her why she had so many pairs of black shoes. Right? I was red up one side and down the other. And it really started to see how, again, some of those those kinds of nuances really do make a difference. We see it in communication styles.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, even more simply, we see this a lot with couples. And I did it working with a couple, and it took me a second to realize what the problem was, because I actually didn't, my initial response wasn't that it was a problem. But if a guy is angry, mad, upset, pissed off, it's all the same.
Right.
But for most women, each one of those are very distinct levels, places.
Right.
And in our communication, even just parroting back, if we hear a woman in heterosexual relationships, if a woman says, well, when you do this, it makes me upset. And if parroting back, you hear, it's like, well, okay, I hear that it makes you mad when I do that. That's bad communication.
Right. No, I didn't say mad. I said upset.
Exactly. See, he doesn't listen to me.
Yeah.
So I would imagine how that would kind of create some conflicts.
Yeah, my favorite line is the guy comes home from work and says to his wife, "Oh, what a lousy day." And she says, "Oh, tell me about it." And he says, "I just did."
Yeah, exactly.
That's not an invitation for a venting session. It's just a statement. But, Michelle, I want to ask you about what really prompted me to want to have you on the show was your posting about this side project. I just read about it in your bio there, the hashtag Ask Lesbians Project, or AskLesbians.com. I love the first question that you said you're often asked, that if you refer to your wife as your wife, does that mean that you're the husband? And I know we've talked about this before with same-sex couples, men or women. There's always this assumption
people
that
have a hard time getting out of that dynamic.
It's related to that heterosexism we were talking about before.
Right.
Somebody has to be the guy, or who's the top, or all these weird questions. People can't accept that two men or two women can be men and women together.
Right.
There's this heterosexist sort of framework that just defines everything, and I don't take offense to those things, because even lesbians who are just coming out subscribe to these same kinds of beliefs. And it's confusing because there isn't just a general body of knowledge about, how being a lesbian looks or works. And that's part of what I love about doing these random quirky surveys that I do, is that, mostly they expose how wrong we get things when we make these kinds of assumptions. And it's really changing so much more now that younger lesbians are not having the issue around having to censor nearly as much and keep very private and secret, so they're able to have healthier, more public relationships. And they're adding children to the mix. And frankly, in my practice, that's the new wave of issues. I've termed it toddlerism. And that is another big difference in terms of relationship work between heterosexuals and same-sex. I work almost predominantly with lesbians. I don't work with a lot of gay men. So the male relationships are yet again different. It's not different. You can't just say, oh, well, the gay and lesbian relationships, because they're not even the same. Obviously with two men it's very different. But with parenting, there are all of these the role division of labor, role identity, who takes out the trash versus who is, playing with the kids and breastfeeding and feeding and bathing and all of these kinds of, they're very identity-based dilemmas for a lot of couples. That's kind of the new, which I consider progress, that is a new development in presenting issues in my practice.
So is it fair to say then, given what you just said, that, if we can help, even just looking at lesbian couples, sort of break out of those, those social scripts and those expectations that people seem to default to, that, even when it comes to division of roles, it's really just a choice that they have the potential for greater partnership because of more similarity and sharing that's possible.
Yeah, and research actually supports the idea that lesbian relationships and gay relationships are more equitable than heterosexual
That's
relationships.
The word.
And they're decisions that are consciously made. There's no default mode. So it's being constructed with intention, which is a gift in my opinion.
I agree. I think it creates more. Oh my God! I'm about to use a word that I think Gwyneth Paltrow uses. But, please forgive me. But basically, it does kind of allow for these more conscious relationships, these more intentional relationships, intentional parenting.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I did warn you how fast this half hour flies by. So before I get the knock on the window from this big guy here. Tell folks, I know you wanted to talk about these retreats that you're hosting. Oh, they're starting.
Well, just go to lesbiancouples.co and you can learn what you need to do
one
about
coming
those.
up in North Carolina and one in Portland over the summer. Folks can look for that.
Okay, and let me just repeat. Lesbiancouples.co?
Yep.
Not .com. Right.
Michelle O'Mara from
so
Indiana,
great to see you.
Thanks again for joining us, and thanks to our listeners and viewers on Facebook and on the radio. And please join us next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Right. And you can still submit questions through Facebook. Good night.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.